Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin Reville with 2F by C Tactical, going on our From the Vault series that we've been hosting using different historical firearms that come through the shop available to you, as well as some in our personal collection. We try to highlight the ones that are in the shop available to everyone for chances for you to own history first, and then we'll move into some personal collection. We've been very fortunate lately to have a lot of new weapons coming through that are of significant historical moments or served very unique purposes throughout history in various armies. And we want to bring those to you first. We have another one for you here today, the Schmidt-Rubin 1889 96 variant. So what does all that mean? Well, Schmidt-Rubin is two names. That is Colonel Schmidt and Colonel Rubin. The Swiss military, late 1800s, early 1900s, were looking for rifles to replace the traditional breech loading, single shot and muzzle loading rifles that we saw throughout the American Civil War as we moved towards the Spanish-American War for us here in the United States, where the bolt action rifle's king. The Gewehr 88 that comes out by Germany, and the various other Mausers that really take off and make that style of action, the bolt action, the way of the future. And Switzerland was looking for their own version of that type of rifle to bring to the table. They came up with something rather interesting. So Colonel Schmidt is the one who came up with the rifle, while Colonel Rubin is the one who came up with the cartridge. The cartridge is 7.5 Swiss, or 7.5 by 55. Not as common today, unfortunately, as it once was, but was a cartridge that served the Swiss military all the way up through the 1950s, the late 1950s. The Schmidt-Rubin rifle that was first ordered and designed in 1889. It went into service in 1891, and the various different models of this particular rifle served all the way up until it went out of service in 1958 and was replaced with more modern battle rifles that you and I would see today. This particular one is not an original 1891. It is an 1889-96 variant. What does that mean exactly? Well, the 96 is an update. That's 1896 is what it's referencing for the update. They moved the locking lugs from the back of the bolt here to the front of the bolt. Kind of Mauser-ish, if you will. That's where you would see the locking lugs in the Mauser. But they moved it back up front just like you would typically see. Now, one thing you'll notice about these particular rifles is they're very long. And that is true. They are very long. You got to remember, late 1800s, we weren't dealing with mechanized militaries at the time. Still horseback cavalry that you saw all the way through World War I. The tank and stuff that would come later, that you would see people like at the time Colonel Patton, but then later General Patton and the Germans, specifically with Blitzkrieg in 1940, use. That hasn't been invented yet, and that wouldn't come to much later. Now, Patton did use, with Pancho Villa, a mechanized vehicle with a machine gun mounted to it, but the true cavalry was still horseback. Why is that important in rifle design? Well, if you're in the military and you are an infantryman and you have to fight someone on horseback, you have to have a much longer reach when it comes to the hand side of things. That's why you see a lot of these rifles have really excessively long bayonets. And then when you put the bayonet on this, you see the overall length of the rifle really becomes pronounced. And that's so you can reach up and touch someone on a horseback. That's the purpose for it. So they are very much very long compared to what a modern rifle would be. It does give you greater accuracy at distance, just like you would typically see with anything with a long barrel. But the real interesting thing is in the mechanism of this particular rifle. They were 12-round rifles, 10 or 12 rounds, which did give them increased firepower compared to some of the more common variants of the time. But these are what we call straight pull rifles. What does that mean? That means that the actual cocking mechanism of them is just a straight pull back and then locks itself in to fire. This allows for a much higher rate of fire compared to, say, the German variants of the Mauser. When you even up through World War II, and when you look at a K98K, like the one I have here in my personal collection, it has the rotating lug locking mechanism of the bolt, whereas this is just a straight pull. As fast as you can pull it, you can shoot it. It does have a Mauser action, meaning it locks open upon empty, so you do have to push down on the follower in order to get it to load in a cartridge. But it is a much faster rate of fire compared to most of the weaponry of the time. We did see some improvements with this throughout the ages of this particular rifle span. Most notably, the more famous K31 and M1911, if you will. And when we say 1911, we're not talking about the handgun, the Schmidt-Rubin 1911 or the Schmidt-Rubin K11, however you want to designate it. What does that mean? It just means that they were updates to this particular weapon system. They were shortened significantly to come in line with a more carbine type rifle of the time, very much in line with, say, the more World War II contemporaries. The action was reworked a little bit to make it a little bit smoother, but it still featured that straight pull design. Everything about it was straight pull. You still could stripper clip feed these into the internal magazine, but the other interesting thing about these is it actually features a button quick release magazine, which again, given its era, and you got to think this is a 1896 idea here, if we will, for this upgrade. It does provide for quick reload in a way that you could not do with most of the rifles of its time. Leave it to the Swiss, of course, right, to make a very efficient, complex machine. While maybe not overtly complex, they made a very efficient machine nonetheless. The tactics of the time did not really utilize the quick reload magazine ability. It was mostly stripper clip fed featured like an internal magazine that you would see on the K98 or any other rifle of that time, the Turkish Mauser we will take a look at, and so on and so forth. So you don't really see it utilized with a quick mag change like we would think of today in the era that it served. But it certainly had that capability. You could think of, say, the British MK1 number 3. You know, I have an example here. This also featured a relatively easy change magazine, right? At least I should say easy for the time. But again, the tactics didn't really allow for that to be fully developed and utilized the way that you would see come later with the, things like the M16 or even the M14 or something that would come along, 40, 50 years later in the case of this one. But I do find these very interesting. The one question we always get in the shop, because this is on display, it is available, is what is this hook here, right? Why is this hook? It's not for the bayonet mount, because that's the bayonet lug right there. It slides over the top of it. Well, so you got to think, again, World War I era, pre-World War I era, really Spanish-American War era. The way they would do it is when you were in a unit and you were taking a little downtime, you would actually stack your rifles into like teepee looks. You'd stack them muzzle up in a row, and this was so they could interlock together to maintain that tri-lug stance with them. This would be utilized all the way through World War I, by the way. It's a very European idea. You're getting a little R&R behind the lines. You got your rifle near you, but you don't want to have it on you. These things are heavy, especially compared to modern weaponry. You just stack them up with each other. That way you would keep the muzzle out of the grass, so you're not fouling up the barrel. The action is set pretty far forward compared to the butt of the rifle, so everything stays clean. Now, one of the downside is, you know, direct hit from artillery, and there goes all the weaponry for your troops, which is something that would happen in World War One, and one of the reasons why stuff like that was removed from future productions of weaponry. But there are several examples of that era that features that same stacking lever, or whatever you want to call it. In fact, I've got a Berthier rifle right here, which is French, and it has it as well. That is what this is. It is just to stack your rifles amongst your fellow riflemen. The bayonet attachments are up here. This has nothing to do with the bayonet. It's just simply to stack your rifles. But that, again, very interesting piece. Now, why were there not more straight pulls? You know, figuring out how fast you could fire compared to a traditional bolt action. There's a couple reasons for that. The Swiss were not the only ones to do this in terms of straight pulls. Again, just to pull an example. Now, this is a World War II reworked one, but this is a Steyr M95. This particular model is a 30. It was bought by the Nazis. They cut them down. This would have been a very long rifle, very similar to this 89-96 here. But this was also a straight pull rifle. Very similar. This would feature a little bit different internal mechanism. We'll get into this one day. But this is just to show that Austria did it as well. This particular one was made in 1903, so not long after this. So straight pulls were incorporated. They just weren't utilized. The truth is, they're a little bit more complicated than the traditional rolling, locking lug of a traditional bolt. Again, leave it to the Swiss, right, to do something a little bit more complicated. In order to get this to seal into the chamber, all these pieces have to be finely machined, because you don't want this to blow back into your face when you pull the trigger. Now, these are very safe to shoot. That's not to say they're not. These are well-machined, well-timed machines. You have a little bit more room for error when it comes to the rolling block, because you're literally rotating the lugs into place. So people just figured it's easier to manufacture the rolling blocks, and we don't have to worry about the fine tuning of the locking mechanism when it comes to the straight pull. It does require more work on the receiver. You can see that this receiver is a lot bigger than, say, the K98. A lot more material. That's another example. Those Steyr certainly didn't go quite as big as the Swiss did. But again, there are reasons why it didn't really catch on. There are a few straight pull rifles today. There was one recently, and the name slips from my mind, from SHOT Show that was just released. It's a 22 long rifle with a quick change barrel, but that is still kind of unusual today. Pretty much everyone uses a true Mauser action. This is not a true Mauser action because it's a straight pull rifle. It does have the Mauser lock open feature, if you will, but it's definitely its own design. But like I said, these would serve all the way up through 1958. And then they would be replaced by various different weapons. The Swiss, it's the STW-51, I believe, was the main battle rifle that replaced it, featuring NATO rounds and stuff that would come later. But anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this. These are really cool rifles. Like I said, this is available in the shop. Hopefully you'll come and at least check it out. But until next time, we got lots more to bring you. So keep checking in every Friday, and like, comment, subscribe. I try to read the comments and respond if I can, but I appreciate it. Have a good one.